In this episode of the Veteran Business Community Podcast, I'm talking with Amy and Ben Barber from Beaufort Professionals. Now, it's a little bit like The Hobbit, here, there, and back again. Ben grew up in country Queensland, went to the RAF, had an amazing career as a RAF logistician, including deployments and supporting the bushfires down at Malakuta there, but returning back to where he grew up near Warwick in Queensland and really contributing to the rural community out there. So a story quite close to my heart, having, spent a lot of time on farms and in the agriculture industry in my life. So stick around and listen to Amy and Ben Barber. Hello, everybody. And on this episode of the Veteran Business Community Podcast, I'm talking with Ben and Amy Barber from Beaufort Professionals. Hey, guys, how are we going?
Good. How are you today, Pete?
Good. I'm excited. We were just chatting before. This is your first time doing an interview or first time on a pod?
It is, yes.
So hopefully for the folks at home, they're not expecting too much, but we're very, very appreciative to be here.
Mate, anyone who's listened to this more than once knows not to expect too much. So it's a very low bar to jump, mate. So it's all good. First of all, whereabouts in the world are you guys?
So we live just outside the village of Yangan, for those playing along at home. If you have a look on Google Maps, you'll be able to pick out a small little rural farming community. It's a couple of hours out of Brisbane. The nearest town to us is Warwick. We're about 15, 20 minutes out of town there.
So when I look at Yangan, Yangan's got a population of 400. You're not even in Yangan. You're out of Yangan. So
yeah, we're kind of in like no man's land between Warwick and Yangan. We're right just before the border, like the town border. And I think we just call ourselves Yangan.
Yangan. What a name. What a classic Aussie name, Yangan. I don't know where these names come from, but
we're going to get better in a minute when you ask us where we're from, because, wow, if you want to Aussie it up, yeah, you wait.
Let's go there, mate. Whereabouts are you guys from?
So I'm from Emu Vale, because you can't get more Aussie than Emu Vale, which is actually the next village along. So if you, again, for those folks playing along at home, it's about 8-minute drive into the essentially the next valley, and that's where I grew up. So we ran a cattle and cereal grains property there.
Yep.
So this is where where my family and myself grew up. I have 3 siblings, 2 of which who are currently serving army members, and my sister's married to a U.S. Army colonel. So, like we're keeping it in the family. And how about you, Amy?
I'm actually not from Queensland at all. I grew up in a little town called Toronto, near Newcastle, New South Wales. Yeah.
Well, that's near me. I'm just near Terrigal. So Toronto's only half an hour, 45-minute drive from here. So fantastic.
Such a small world. Yeah. Yeah, and I met Ben when he was posted to Williamtown.
Lovely. Ben, what made you join the Air Force from Emu Vale out in the middle of, country Queensland?
Well, to be honest, so where I grew up, we used to live on the side of a mountain in a little cottage up there, and it was on an F-111 bombing run. So essentially the F-111s would come across using terrain following radar and pop up over the little ridge where our house was on. And so, whenever they were coming back from the Western airspace, they would essentially buzz our house at a couple of 100 feet. Everything would rattle, but it was fantastic. That was my introduction to the Air Force. And then in 1995, we'd moved just essentially down the hill to the next property. And I was going to say probably pitch black in 95. Essentially, the airspace that they were doing the dogfighting was essentially over our house. So I used to literally lie on the grass and just watch essentially Australian, it was Singaporean jets at the time as well, dogfight over our house. Very, if folks are thinking very like the Battle of Britain-esque, just watching up in the sky. And I was very fortunate that the XO of 6 Squadron was over in the next little town, his family grew up there. There's a guy called Charlie Andrews, and Charlie, and some actually folks from this podcast might know Charlie. He was an Army helicopter instructor, came back to Air Force later on, but his dad owned his family owned a little petrol station in Killarney, the Shell. And when I was about probably 15 or 16, Charlie brought me down to Amberley for the day. And that was fantastic. That was my introduction to life in the Air Force, was spending a day with him, looking at maintenance of F-111, sitting in the cockpit down at 6th Squadron, learning about staff duties at 82 Wing. It was a fantastic time. So really that was our introduction. I always wanted to be a navigator on an F-111 after that. Turns out my eyes don't work. And so I had to choose something else. And literally at recruiting in Brisbane, they were like, tick a box. You can either be a Air Force logger or an Air Force engineer. And my uncle was an engineer. And I was like, well, I don't want to do that. So I'll pick the other box. I don't even know what that is, but it's not the engineering job. And so that's how it all turned out.
And then the die is cast. I remember I was always a fan of when I was growing up, there was a magazine called Takeoff, and it was just all about jets every week. And I used to love it. It was probably $2 or whatever from the newsagent. But I did my work experience for year 10 at 176 Air Dispatch Squadron in Penrith. So that was my little, I always wanted to join the Army. But for me, I didn't join until I was 30, so a little bit late. Did you go in straight from school?
Literally, I joined on my 18th birthday that day.
Wow.
So
is that ADFA or direct entry?
ADFA. So went down to Canberra, and I guess fortunately for a business podcast like this, I didn't do what I was told to do. I ended up doing a Bachelor of Arts in Geography and Business Management. At the time, they were trying to stream everyone down a very generic path, and I did go to the commandant and sort of plead my case in second year to continue to do other things. But it's the stuff that, as it turns out, 20 years later, you're an applied geographer, and it's only for the fact that I did that at uni that meant that we were able to do what we do, and crack on and stuff like you.
An applied geographer. I'm a simple guy. What does that mean?
So essentially, like amongst, if we jump to what we do, we do lots of different stuff in our little consultancy. And it's one of the things about living in a regional community is, to be honest, there's lots of need for just folks to help out doing all sorts of things. And so it very much is a collection of previous life things and new life stuff. And so certainly the majority of, a good portion of our work these days is we provide specialists into other organizations to essentially provide that SME support to their businesses. And so the majority of my work each day is spent working in the agricultural and environmental measurement industries. So working with mining companies, but mostly in agriculture, which is, very much in line with farming. But essentially, applied geography is, geography itself is very much about the interaction between people and the environment. And so that's what we do is, in this case, it's a lot of farming, but it could be contamination. There's a whole bunch of different things where, again, surprisingly, if we go back to our previous lives in the military, standards always weren't fantastic when it came down to like fuel, fuel exposure, PFAS, all sorts of different things where have certainly come to the fore in the last couple of years. And some of our work is around the modeling of that environmental data. So we've actually got accurate maps and different things of where that contamination is. Or in agriculture, it's about trying to get the most out of the environment that we have. Unfortunately, it's pretty tough out there in the farming world, and it's about making every drop of rain count.
Well, mate, I was when I got my HSC results, I was rather unspectacular, and there was only probably 3 courses I had just enough marks to do. One was maths teaching for some reason. The other one was nursing. The other one was horticulture. So I went to Hawkesbury Ag College and did horticulture for a few years, which was brilliant. So I spent basically the next, a couple of years doing parks and gardens, but I ended up all around Australia doing mainly tree crops, and I did a lot of cut flower for a long time. And the reason I joined the army was, there's two things. There was a massive drought happening in around 2005, 2006, and it was really hard on the land. I also had no money, and I had no money to buy my own farm. So I thought, look, I'll just go to the army, do 5 or 10 years, and then come back to the land and buy something myself. But, met a girl from Bondi and Coogee, and I never made it quite that far back, but well done for getting back, mate, and dragging Amy back with you.
Well, it's been a big thing for you, right? Like it was not what you expected coming to the land.
I was really naive, to be honest. Like the idea sounded beautiful. Let's go and live on a 10-acre property overlooking the mountains, and it'll be wonderful. But my goodness, there's so much work involved.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not like you can pop over the fence to the neighbors, or just say good
it's
to
quite
walking out the
isolating
driveway
at times. Yeah, it can be really isolating.
Let's just chat about you for a second, Amy. What were you doing when you met Ben, and what's your career path been?
So when I met Ben, I was transitioning jobs. I was actually working in a debt receivables company, and I was going over to working for, at the time it was Downer Engineering, now called Downer Group. I was doing their like work health and safety, environmental quality, and return to work when I met Ben. Shortly after that, Ben was sent off to Tyndall for quite some time. So we did some long distance there. Then he came back and got posted to Sydney. And then I followed him with that and went and worked in some local government in the Hawkesbury City Council, again, working in risk and compliance, work health and safety. From there, we went to Canberra on our next posting, and I was the risk and compliance manager for Spotless at Joint Operations Command. And that was a really interesting job. So that was doing all risk and compliance, from catering to cleaning to running our own power stations, sewage treatment plants, mail service, security, whole bunch of stuff, which is very broad. And I learned so much from that job.
After you?
I took quite a few years off whilst we had our two girls, and we were posted to Sydney. And then once they went off to school, when we moved here, then Ben and I decided to start our own business.
It's funny, you being Sydney and working with Hawkesbury, I imagine Richmond Air Base?
Yes.
Yeah, so I was just over the road, really.
Yeah, from Hawkesbury Ag College, so absolutely. And that was one of the things I used to love doing. Like, even though I'd taken a bit of let's say, a tangent from the military as I went into horticulture for a long time, I used to quite often, jump in my car and head up to, I think it's Clarendon train station, and just sit across the road there. And I remember one of the houses I lived in Richmond when I was using was a street called Francis Street, and it was directly under the flight path of Richmond Air Base. So I sort of, just having that, the C-17 take off at 3:00 in the morning on the, I just loved it. It's something I like, and a lot might be a bit weird, but I love being next to train stations and airports. Like, I love the noise pollution. It's just so just tell us, back to you, Ben, what was your RAF career like? You mentioned you got a deployment to the Middle East Theatre. What did you do over there?
So I was very fortunate to deploy with my unit, so with 3 crew. So we essentially ran a radar station in Afghanistan. Not really well known. In fact, I even remember we got left off the deployed units overseas list for, the Australia Day. Everyone's doing a cracking job. No one cared. But essentially, control and reporting, it was an essential job for, folks that essentially needed air support, got in trouble. All those requests and all that control for air assets would be controlled by our folks that were there. So 3 crew, 114M crew up in Darwin, and 3 crew at Williamtown, and essentially under this essentially joint unit, which was called the Control and Reporting Center. And that was at a place called Camp Palomino, which is a little tiny side camp off CAF. And yeah, it was I guess a combined unit in our doctrine, because it was an American comms unit and our radar station that provided, essentially Afghanistan was cut in half. So there was the British at Bastion that controlled one part of the theater, and then we controlled the other side. And then there would be AW and C aircraft that would come in as well to control other points when people had to go offline for maintenance.
I only had the pleasure of going down to Kandahar Airfield for a few days, but I was just gobsmacked at the might of the US military machine there. From like all of us watching Top Gun and things like that, to being in the airfield and seeing F-16s, F-18s, all these other planes just taking off, the A-10s. What are those sort of helicopter planey things, the Ospreys?
Oh, that Osprey. Well, there's, yeah, and certainly at the time when I was there, the British were there with their Harriers. Yep. So, there was an awful lot of stuff. I think for a time it was the busiest single strip runway in the world. And essentially there was some sort of thing taking off every 2 minutes or landing every 2 minutes.
But these aren't like Cessnas or,
no.
Or they are 767s or 737s or something. These are like warplanes, just one after the other. I was just gobsmacked. And then there was that little bit of what was it called, the roller skating rink, or the where all the shops were, and you had TGIF and all of the little. There was like thousands of people inside it.
Oh, absolutely. And so we were sort of over towards one edge. So it was a 15-20 minute drive for us to actually get to the base, like the actual like the main Australian compound there. But yeah, like there was, especially for units that were moving through, because there was always new units coming into theater. They'd move in, they'd do their initial, like, I guess, pre outside the wire certification there. They'd get ready to rock and roll, and then they'd be airlifted out or go out on a major movement from CAF out, depending on where they were going. So like an interesting place.
What year were you there?
2009. I got there right at the start of 2009. So
what was the threat situation there like at the time? Was there rocket attacks or?
Yeah, like pretty much it was either daily or, a couple of times a day, depending on the day. There was also, there'd be at different times where they'd try and form up for a ground attack on the base. Yeah, so like you'd often hear counter battery fire going out. So there'd be rockets coming in and then counter battery fire going out. Yep. And yeah, like good times. It was, it was, for me, it was fantastic to deploy with my own team. So, it's something very much that Army deploys a formed unit, but for Air Force, it's less that you would be deploying with, your regular team. And to deploy with the guys that I work with every day back in Australia, really was fantastic. And to do exactly the job that we were trained to do.
It's funny, like with the rocket attacks, for example, I remember the first time and the first couple of times it happened, I was shit scared, to be honest. Like I had no idea what it meant when the alarms went off and, you could hear the rockets coming in. But it's funny that very soon we started doing a rocket raffle. So, everyone chucked in $5 in the hat per day, and we had a rotating day. Because back when I was up there in TK, they weren't quite as regular, maybe every week or every other week. And you almost wanted a rocket to hit on your raffle day, because you pocketed a good $100, $200. But and then by the end of the trip, it's like alarm goes off. It's just like, hold your breath. There's the bang, crack on. And that's just how funny you desensitize or normalize.
Yeah, you become very conditioned, don't you? And
So
you almost come up with some humor about it.
Yeah, like, well, $5 a day, there was 10 of us in the raffle. It was $50 a day. So you were like,
yeah,
it's good
money to be made. Yeah. And I always the folks that I was always most interested we'd go over to actually to the base to get supplies, food, because essentially we were completely self-sufficient. We
Yep.
ran all our own stuff, and it was very much, if anyone has seen MASH, think of MASH, that was our little camp.
Yep.
It was a little wall compound away from everyone else, and we kind of did our own thing. On the other side, we're right next to the airfield, like, 100 meters away. So it was loud there all the time. But, we ran our own little VCP. We did all our own stuff. Everyone was on picket. And certainly I always go back to some of the best chats I think you ever have with random Americans that you end up at picket with at 4 o'clock in the morning in the, it's frozen ground. You're just freezing cold. Or even, I remember one of the, I guess, sort of philosophical discussions I ended up having with one of the controllers themselves. We're out on picket one morning, and we were doing the classic throwing rocks into a hole. And so we were like, I wonder how many years back in time there's been, soldiers out there bored on picket, manning a VCP and throwing rocks in a hole. And they're like centurions, I'm sure, were out there throwing rocks in a hole.
Yeah.
Because, there's not much going on. And it's 4 o'clock in the morning. And there's, that road and that hole in the road is just getting deeper every day. So got to do your bit.
And I wonder how many people you're responsible for right now with the MASH theme running through their head. But
yeah, no, hopefully. But if they imagine that was pretty much the setup we had.
You've done your deployment, you've got back to Australia, you've met Amy, and now you're starting this new life and this new family. What was the trigger for you to think that it's time to transition and look at the next chapter together?
Well, to be honest, we were in for another 10 years. So we were doing, we had multiple postings after that, with being together. And I was very fortunate that Amy, sort of joined on the adventure, and we did postings after that. And then essentially we were at Ambly. I had a fantastic job there. My job was to run the terminal at Ambly. So looking after fuel, passengers, cargo at the airport there. It was a great job. As part of 23 Squadron, there was, I had a really fantastic opportunity to go down and set up and then coordinate the evacuation for the Malakuta airhead in the bushfires in 2019, which is really, for me, the culmination of everything I'd learned in all the different jobs I'd had in the military. So that was kind of like a fantastic,
This is your last.
Yeah, big gig.
Yeah.
Let's just, can I just unpack that a little bit? Because my experience at that time was I was out of the army for a few years, but I was absolutely conscious that I was not participating and I wasn't helping in what was, one of Australia's biggest natural disasters, the whole East Coast basically on fire. Just share a little bit more about what was happening at Malakuta there and your role.
Yeah, absolutely. So Malakuta essentially had, well, if we take a step back, I always think that natural disasters are some of the best training that the military can do compared to normal exercises that we normally run, because essentially we're facing, well, the fire or the floods, they get a say, and it's not anywhere near as controlled. So it's much more in line with a realistic training outcome that we would get. Even though it is a real thing, it's a real operation that's happening. I get that, but compared to a neutered or like a defined outcome that we've decided, where's this? It does whatever it feels like, and there's real folks that need helping, and it's a great way that we can actually test our capability in a realistic scenario, which I feel is much more beneficial to defense as a whole. And so Malakuta had been surrounded at that stage by a major bushfire that had come through. Unfortunately, a whole bunch of folks had failed to heed the requirements to evacuate, and that's not necessarily folks in Malakuta itself, and I know a lot of folks did, but there was isolated instances where people came out for day trips and different things from Melbourne and then got caught as well and ended up scattered along the coast. And so I got a phone call at about 11 o'clock on New Year's Eve and said, hey, there's going to be an aircraft waiting for you tomorrow morning down at Amberley. We need you to spool up a team, go and essentially turn RAF Base East Sale, which is, for those that don't know, is a very much a dedicated training base for Air Force. We have a lot of our both ground training and certainly now our air training is conducted out of East Sale, but spin that up into a operational base that can support this evacuation to take place. So that's going to be, working with the base folks themselves, and there was a fantastic base commander there that it was an engineer, he'd been brought in to actually support a major redevelopment of the base. And so this wasn't his forte, sort of like an operational evacuation. And so he was fantastic. He really took the lead in helping to do, essentially, I'd come to him every day and say, hey, here's a spiral development that we need to do across the base to develop a new capability each day, which is going to be a central requirement depending on what aircraft were coming in or how this evacuation was going to take place. And so between 6 Ave that came down, there was all sorts of different units, foreign military assets as well that came in. Essentially, it was bringing together the civilian apparatus as well. So ambulance, fire support, because every day it was punching in fire people and supplies, bringing out evacuees on both fixed wing and rotary assets that were available. And so essentially it was making that all happen and coordinating, setting up an AOC so that we could actually coordinate those air assets. And again, I was really well supported by some fantastic, essentially staff that were down there doing training roles. So they were down there as instructors, but, thankfully Air Force had managed to convince some of their best and brightest to go down and be instructors. And it was being able to then pull them out of, officer training school as a pilot. For example, there was a pilot there with a Distinguished Flying Cross, one of our most recognized flight lieutenants, fantastic pilot, fantastic operator, that I was able to pull out, bring him down and say, hey, I need an AOC. I need someone to control all these air assets. And he's like, got it, sir. Let's make it happen. And for him to then pull up all the operations officers that were under training at their training school and say, right, you've got a real thing to rock and roll with now.
Just get in there and get it done. Well, this is brilliant because it's actually, it's one thing to go and do it overseas. It's one thing to do on a deployment, but to do it in Australia for Australians must have been pretty special, I reckon.
Oh, and there was a couple of different things. There was seeing ADF members from all walks of life do whatever was required was fantastic. I had a PTI that was an ex-mover that I drafted in. She was still qualified and she worked out some dangerous goods that no one else could deal with that kept the weather station at Malakuta operating so we could keep air operations going. I had an ex-AE from Air Force that was able to come in and, essentially set up the administration of, operations for the terminal. And right through, I think there's, certainly from my side, there's nothing better than, that first moment when we hit the ground down at East Sale, down in a C-27 that had come down from Amberley, and walking down the ramp, and there's some scattered emergency services, a few folks there, and you can walk up and go, hello, we're here to help. We're now in charge. And I think for an officer, there's nothing better than just being able to randomly take command as a thing to do, yeah, exactly. Just to be able to go, right, we've got, we're going to do this now. And we absolutely can't wait for your help. But there's, especially when folks are there desperately looking around for someone to actually, guidance. So it was just fantastic. Whether it was having previously worked at Joint Movements Group, a whole range of, essentially it was every part of my career I could look back and there was something that I needed to do that I was able to pull an experience from or some training from or a capability for and go, yeah, wow, wasn't that a good sign off? Um, and then, unfortunately, like many folks, uh, it was a medical discharge. I ended up
Yep.
with a autoimmune disease, and so it was time to go.
It was quite sudden though, because we had planned to, like, we'd actually bought a property out at Harrisville, which is not far from the base there, to build a home, and your medical discharge came through very quickly, and that sort of turned everything upside down,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. And you're sort of close-ish to your upbringing there, Ben. You're what, 50, 100 Ks away, is it?
Yeah, so it's literally door to door about an hour and 28 minutes.
Yep.
Not to say I've driven it before and to know that, but it's an hour and 28.
So you got the point of transition now. Were you always inclined to go into business, or where did this sort of seed of entrepreneurship come from?
I think inherently Ben has always been a very creative person. And he's been very fortunate in his military career where he was in roles where he had the ability to use his creative mind in problem solving in certain scenarios. I think it just almost became second nature for Ben to want to go into owning his own business with that mind frame that he has. He gets that a lot from his dad, who's, quite a wonderful businessman himself. And he's learned a lot just through watching his dad do some pretty major projects. And I think it was just inevitable almost that one day you'd end up owning your own business and being able to use your creative capacity as much as you can.
And certainly, Pete, another major thing that we had to consider was, certainly if you do have a chronic medical condition, you have to do something that makes it fit. And we did initially really struggle to find employment that could be worked around, get the restrictions that were in place. So it turned out that owning your own business is by far the best way to kind of
flexible way.
Yeah. To
I love you sharing about that, particularly in terms of how, the medical stuff leads pathways into business, because for me, veteran enterprise and entrepreneurship, there's a couple of different ways. Like some people, because the military is so constrained and the military is like this, do that, so structured, a lot of people just want to break out of it and become their own boss. But I think particularly for those, who are medically discharged or have other constraints, having a business at your own pace, at your own place is super important. Like you can surge when you need to surge, you can work hard when you need to work hard, but at the same time, being your own boss, you can also be the master of your own destiny. If you need to have some flexibility, have some time, it's really sitting right within your control.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely right. As I said, that we tried, like, again, we were very fortunate that so the initial, essentially, before we even started our own business, literally the day I left the military, I was able to go and work for another veteran friend of mine who'd already discharged a number of years before, and that was in an agricultural setting. So that kind of worked. He essentially was like, "Hey, I'm looking for someone that has a farming background." As Amy said, while we've moved on to our little 10-acre homestead, we still work the family farm, and essentially it all worked out. So I was able to like discharge 12 o'clock at night on whatever day it was, and then 6 o'clock the next morning, crack on for a new company. And that was working for a company called Farm Lab, doing farming work. So being able to have that.
If that's another veteran-owned business, mate, I need an intro.
Yeah, absolutely. So we, it was good to have essentially in that being able to not only, it was kind of a weird thing. So you're being able to distance yourself from the military. So it's kind of like a short stop and it's done. And then you're starting a new career. And as I said before, I never thought I'd get to be a geographer by trade, or why I would ever need that pretty, as it seemed at the time, useless qualification. But it turns out that, when you move to a regional or rural area, and certainly for any of the veterans out there that are looking to move to that space, then as diverse set of qualifications as possible is great, because it's very unlikely that you're going to be basing your business off defence work. It's much more likely that you're going to have to integrate into a rural community. And that's where some of those things, as Amy was saying before, about creativity and being prepared to give it a crack, are really useful, because there's no ending need in rural and regional areas to have smart folks that are prepared to work hard and give anything a go.
Tell us about Beaufort. What do you do, and are you both involved in the business?
You go.
So we started Beaufort essentially as a way that we could get paid. I know that doesn't sound very exciting, but essentially it was a way that we could offer our services out to support other businesses, and essentially that's how it started. The first project that we actually had was working for local government to write and it was a defence related thing, to write a white paper for defence industry in regional areas, and that was very much our start, because the guy that was running it was like, hey, we need to pay you somehow, so you should start a business so we can pay you, which seemed like a good idea at the time. And since then, we've, as kind of Amy alluded to before, one of the benefits of being out was that you can kind of do whatever you want. And we've really embraced do whatever we feel like. So whether that's setting up ranges for essentially drone weapons firing, we've done that. We've worked for Big Four consulting firms writing policy. We've worked for government. We work in the ag industry. We do stuff in mining. Essentially anything we feel like that day. Medical work, you name it, we are prepared to give it a crack. And I'll be honest, what we enjoy is finding good folks out there, like really creative other people that are prepared to give something a crack. And you might not know how to do it, but you're like, oh, well, let's do a thing.
A lot of unpaid time that goes into brainstorming with whether they're, ex-defense people or primarily they're ex-defense people, aren't they? Just brainstorming on crazy ideas and how we could potentially pull them off, which is really interesting. It's nice to wake up every morning and go, what are we doing today?
I got no idea.
What's on your mind today?
It's funny because it's all the ways the sort of serendipitous moments of how life leads you. And, Ben, you're studying geography, but Amy, it seems like a lot of your work in both the WH compliance assurance space is complementary to the business as well. Is that right? Yeah,
it is. It's very helpful. A lot of the time I'm able to, like for the companies that we, I guess, contract our services to, a lot of primarily we do still work with Farm Lab a lot, contracting our services to them. So I do a lot of their safety stuff and a lot of their data quality for the soil samples that come in. I think in any organization, it's good to have a background on what your, regulatory requirements are. And it's a very handy background to have and to help others with.
So do you often, I had a passion for, living outside the cities, and I used to have a thing when I was living in caravans, just driving around the center of Australia, that I could find a job within 2 days. If I turned up in any town, it didn't matter where it was, I just popped down to the local pub and I'd just have a beer and start chatting. Anyone got some work going on. And then, sure enough, it'd be either working on a cane farm or a grape farm or something like that. Do you see or find many veterans going back to the land in your experience?
Not as many. I think more veterans, as you said, you can turn up to any country town. Like there is more work going on in country towns than anyone needs anyone knows. Like literally, especially, and not to like, I was going to say it's across a really broad range of different activities. So I know that there's just down the road there was a guy that used to work for Boeing at Amberley. So defense prime. He ended up out here to work at the Big W distribution facility. If you're again, it's a big shed in Warwick. And essentially, if you get anything from Big W or Woolworths, it probably came through there in logistics. But he ended up here because he could sell out of Brisbane, buy a little farm, and he was like the cost of living was much lower. He could afford to send his kids to a really good school, and it was different. And we do know that there are lots of veterans. When I say lots of veterans, there are veterans around that have moved back to the land.
It's been where they're originally from, though. They're not generally a choice to get out of the military and go, now I want to go and live in the bush. Yeah.
And certainly some of them do it because it helps for those folks that are really looking for some isolation. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but that's the reality of why some of the folks do come back here. But at the same time, it is very isolating. As you know, like a regional town, you have to get involved. There's lots of things to do and lots of really good folks to meet. But you have to, as you said, go to the pub and make the effort to try and integrate as best you can into the community.
It's a very different lifestyle from posting around where, especially for the military member, you're going from one location to another. You've got a job to go to. You know that there's going to be at least a handful of people there that you've known from a previous posting. Same with the spouses. You become very comfortable posting to a location and just living in like the military spouse bubble.
Yep.
You know that there's going to be something on base where you can go to, whether it's a mum's catch up morning tea once a week. And then when you leave, whether it's a chosen decision or a rapid decision made for you, and you move to a rural location, it's really isolating, and there is no guarantee that you're going to be able to make connections, whether that's business wise or friendship wise. So you have to work really, really hard to make those connections for yourself.
I find that for me, getting friends with people in country areas, it was a little bit challenging to get into the routine or rhythm of people's life, because you got to bump into people every day. You got to see them. It takes 10 or 20 times before you're from raising a little nod to, hey, how are you? I've seen you around a little bit. And then, but it's that real, getting into the cadence or rhythm of other people's lives. And obviously kids is the easiest way to do it with, sport and, the school. But I think the one thing that I miss the most about having a career on the land is the cadence of the seasons. So, just whether it be, working in the paddock as daylight savings he kicks in and the day length's a little bit longer, or, it's a little bit chillier at this time of the year, and really sort of resonating with that season. And there's a beautiful big Angophora tree about 20 meters behind me here. And it's just started, the bark has just started cracking. And I was pointing to my boys out. I'm like, really look at this. In about a week, this tree is going to be vibrant orange as all the bark comes off. And so that's a big thing for me, is like trying to just get into that inculcation of seasons. And that's the one thing that I miss being more in town.
Yeah.
Oh, and like here, just look at, like, we can look at our window here, and the winter barley is just coming to its end now. It's starting to brown off before it's going to get sprayed out to get harvested. Harvest time, the fact that, we've got our, like, essentially where we live, the neighbours' silos right next to our house on the other side of the little laneway, little dirt track. And so, you're absolutely right. Like, harvest time comes, there's going to be farmers out that
all hours of the night.
Yep, they're just harvesting. Yeah. And you're right. Like that cadence of life, and it's certainly because a lot of folks work different hours in the country, and you like, our only sponsorship that we do is of the local soccer team in town. Like that's our thing where we sponsor, but it is those things where that sense of community. The best way to meet people is through kids sport. It's
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
everyone will come together on a weekend. Sport is still a really important facet of country towns, and like it's huge. It's essentially the big community thing that parents will do for their kids is getting together on a Saturday morning and meeting up and having a coffee. And that's where you do meet all the other essentially small business owners. It's the best small business thing is because
Networking.
yeah,
It's funny. I was working in Emerald, out in the middle of central Queensland, and I was doing grapes at the time, and table grapes. So table grapes hard work because it's on trellis. It's hot. It's a very 100-acre paddock, and there's just no shade. But I do remember starting one morning at about 5:30, and it's just one of the great moments of my life. But there was this magpie just sat on the end of the trellis about maybe 8-10 meters away, and just sung to me for like 15 minutes, and he was just had it. The sun was cracking over mate, it's a really special, beautiful moment for me. And this little birdie just chirped at me and sang to me as I was, working on the grapevines. And I guess the only thing my only one regret is I got offered a job doing harvesting. Sorghum season had just kicked off. And they said, look, mate, we'll put you in a harvester and you can go from here to Cootamundra over the next 6 months. But it was 12 hours in the machine every day. And I had a dog and I was like, well, what's a dog going to do every day? So I didn't pick that up, but I would have loved to just sat in the machine, especially it's just some of these simple stuff is just really good fun for me.
Yeah.
it is a completely different, as you said, when you go from
It's a different pace of life.
Yeah.
And I think even when we are trying to do our networking with those other small businesses in town, one thing that Ben and I were discussing this morning when we were talking about speaking with you today was that transitional phase from the military lifestyle, especially when you've been in it for a really long time, you're really kind of indoctrinated into the lingo, the acronyms, all that kind of stuff, is when you come to a rural community, most of them aren't exposed to that kind of way of doing business or
Yep.
language. And something that Ben and I have had to be really cognizant of is, I guess, translating a lot of the way that we would speak in like with military terms, and even working with Farm Lab, because most of those people are ex-military. That kind of flowed really easily and it worked really easily. But when we're trying to engage with new clients in the local community, we've got to be really mindful that they might not have any idea what we're actually talking about,
Yeah.
or in a way that we're actually trying to portray something. So being really aware of our audience has been something that we've had to really hone in on.
It's a really fascinating thing. And one of the points I always believe is that birds of a feather flock together. And it's why there's so much powerful momentum with veteran business community people working together, because it's just we have a shared experience, we have a shared language, and we have a shared culture. If I can ask and just unpack a little bit more about that, Amy, how did you guys go around like setting up those relationships to start really driving revenue?
I think initially, as we said before, we were so fortunate when we decided to go down this path of having our own business that a lot of them were initially with other military-based organizations. So that made that transition quite easy at the start. And then we were able to make connections through those people with other people. And I guess slowly it becomes more civilian as it goes down the line. Again, a lot of the time with being here in Warwick, when we were trying to make connections to other small businesses, a lot of people that Ben grew up with here in Warwick, they all sort of went away and did their own thing. And as they've had families, they've all come back as well. So very fortunately, Ben's always been amazing with building good relationships with people. He's very personable. You know, Ben can't go down the road to get bread and milk without taking several hours because he runs into so many people from his past and just picks up conversations from where they left off 20 years ago. So that's been really helpful for us because I'm much more of an introvert. I find it quite a challenge to go out and introduce myself to someone, talk about our product, whereas Ben just inherently has this persona that people are drawn to. So that's been really helpful. I think it's just also been a learning curve, having meetings and things like that that are not military based, they're totally civilian, and have one of us say something that may be a military term or an acronym, and just watching that person and being sort of practicing our own emotional intelligence to see how they respond to that phrase, whether they're confused or, just picking up little subtle differences in their body language. We can then go back and sort of self-reflect on us as our own little company and go, okay, well, maybe next time we speak to these people, we need to maybe leave those kind of phrases out, or perhaps explain them a little bit better so that they know that where we're coming from.
Just test and adjust.
Trial and error. Yeah.
Yeah. And certainly a lot of our colleagues and a lot of the folks that we know have very much stayed in targeting their businesses. If they are in a business, they've either gone to work for a prime, gone to Canberra, worked for the Big Four, and if it is a small business, it's a very bespoke consultancy that is doing a very specific thing just for defense. And I'm sure, Pete, as you know, the portion of business that goes to small businesses from defense is tiny. And if anything, it really does promote this idea that the best opportunity that we have as a defense business community is to utilize the skills that we have to, our creativity, our ability to quickly assess situations, to take risk-based management decisions, a whole bunch of things which are key things that we've been taught over time. But the best opportunities happen when we can diversify the folks that we can go and engage with. And it's really interesting. We were sadly at a funeral for a friend of mine recently, and I ran into some mates of mine from my first posting down in Adelaide, and they're 06 military folks now down in Canberra, and we were having a chat, and they were super excited. They were like, Ben and Amy, what are you guys doing these days? Because we went through like kind of everything, everything from planning irrigation in vineyards to, weapons facilities for drones to, all sorts and biomedical stuff, sustainable aviation fuel, you kind of name it, we'll give it a crack. And they were like, well, we could never do that. These are people in their early 40s, but they're like, we could never do that. We're stuck now in this defense pathway because that's what we've chosen. And if anything that we could, say to our community, it is like, you're not stuck. You don't have to do this. When I say don't have to do it, you don't have to engage defense forever. And so there's a great opportunity in that vast space of all sorts of different folks out there doing different things where our skills are really useful. And businesses will. Yeah,
it's just a matter of being able to take those skills that you've learnt within the military, or even being a military spouse, and being able to, I guess, do self-auditing and sort of be your own devil's advocate in what is helpful, what might not be helpful, and just translate that into a broader opportunity for yourself.
Yeah, I love that. And it seems to me that's what you've done with Beaufort as well, because the ability to, one of the things in the military, we sort of think we can solve nearly any problem, particularly as a logistician. Look, it might not be the perfect solution straight up, but I can understand, if we can understand the end state or the outcome of what we're looking to achieve, we can mold ourselves or mold our minds to coming up with a solution.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's next for you guys in the business?
I got no idea. Certainly, we've been one of the main organizations that we support. So FarmLab has just changed its name to GX Lab. They've just acquired a mid-infrared spectrometry business. So we're fairly heavily into contamination modeling at the moment. again, which is something we never really thought we were doing. Amy's doing a lot of stuff with vineyards in New Zealand at the moment, which again is
Is that
fascinating.
wine or table grapes?
Always learning. Sorry.
Wine.
Is that wine or table grape?
Oh, wine.
Wine grape, yep. Fantastic. It just seems like you guys are so flexible in terms of what problems you can take on.
I think we're always willing to give something. We're always willing to entertain an idea. I think it doesn't always pull off. We get a lot of friends that have their own businesses. They'll often come to us and say, "Hey, I've got this crazy idea. What do you think?" And we're happy to brainstorm and I guess, yeah, like just really try to imagine how we could do something. We both really enjoy doing lots of research and I think the biggest thing that I particularly have learned in being a military spouse and moving around is learning how to adapt with unpredictability. So there's always going to be some curveball thrown at you, a new posting location, have to leave your work. Like there's always something that's uncertain in that sort of lifestyle. And so I think, although that's not where I used to really be comfortable with, I think I've just learnt to adapt that everything has always happened for a reason. And there's always been, fortunately, a good long-term outcome because of something that has happened. So we never sort of turn any opportunity down. They don't always pull off, but they often lead to somewhere that we never even thought we would be going. So it's been really interesting.
And so I was just trying to think of some other things, Pete, with another member of the community. So Dom Foley, he and I are planning a major wharf in Fiji at the moment, randomly, because we've got someone's come to us and say, "Could you plan a wharf in Fiji?" And so we're doing that at the moment. We just finished a project for one of the big four consulting firms to do a study into defence industry for businesses in central Queensland. And that got handed back to government where we did the study. So that's kind of all sorts of random stuff.
It's often really difficult when somebody in passing just says, "So what do you do?" And it's like, "How long have you got?"
We've got a real interesting, we just finished another study into renewable energy projects. So the impact of renewable energy projects on farming communities. All sorts.
Love the adaptability and I've got to ask, how do you know Dom? Through VBC or beforehand?
Yeah.
Beforehand, yeah. So he got us onto VBC.
Excellent. He's a fantastic lad, and he won't do the podcast yet. He's too shy. So hopefully you're listening to this, Dom. Or hopefully you're the one of the 3 listeners that we've got out there.
Convince him.
Yeah, we'll be so he was served with one of my brothers at down at I believe 2 Commando or Souls or wherever they were together, certainly. And he contacted us. So when Amy was at Jock, she looked after like the chemical weapons detection capability there. And so we had a random email from Dom about particulate measurement that essentially came from Amy's work in chemical weapons detection, which is a very odd thing to get there. But hey,
random connection. But been good buddies ever since.
We actually just with Dom and another one of his colleagues, we just did a particulate measurement activity in an abattoir.
Well, that makes sense.
That
makes sense. And the amount of dust, the amount of dust that I've been into in like piggeries and all sorts of shearing sheds and that, mate.
Exactly. It was primarily looking at prolonging the shelf life of the meat by reducing the cardboard, like the cardboard boxes that it all goes into. So those cardboard box particulates potentially shorten the shelf life of the meat. So we were trying to work out how we could detect how many cardboard particulates were in the air in the packing rooms.
Well, Dom, you're on my radar, mate, to get on here and tell your story one day. Hey, but look, Ben and Amy, it's a real pleasure to learn about you. I love a good Raffy worry. We've had way too many army jerks on the show lately, so it's really good to get and Amy in particular. Our partners and spouses of military people and veterans are a core part of what we want to do here at the veteran business community. So We often end up with, medals in our chests and that, but I just want to recognize that partners and spouses sacrifice in many of the same kind of ways, but don't get the recognition. So thanks for all your support.
Oh, thank you. It is interesting when, Ben was serving, and I think even like on my first time when I came onto your VBC discussions
Lunch
in the mess,
Yep.
I'm pretty sure I introduced myself as I'm Amy. I'm just, a military spouse. And I think it was yourself that corrected, saying, no, you're not just a military spouse. And I guess the more that I've sort of thought about it, we do have so many experiences, as I was saying before, in like that unpredictable environment that we have to navigate through. It is really useful in a business setting, and you can actually bring so many attributes to it to deal with anything that sort of comes your way during, those hard times in business. So it is something that I'm also very grateful for.
And I often think that, again, birds of a feather flock together. People who serve in uniform in the military are generally high achieving and punch above their weight, and probably attract partners of the same disposition. So, I think it's all part of the broader community that we're trying to generate. So, look, a real pleasure. I do have a little bit of bush envy. I won't deny it. I do have an Akubra. Actually, she's still up on the wall. But I no longer go to work in a dry as a bone and a set of ski pants when it's wet and work in the paddock all day and get wet. But maybe one day I'll be able to get myself 100 acres and let's see how we go. But thank you for both for jumping on today and sharing your story.
Thanks very much. It was real. We really appreciate the opportunity. And
I tell you, for your first one, no cuff too tough. All good. It's pretty casual here.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Hopefully that was okay.
No, you did well. You did well. Hey, look, everybody.
Except for like being in and out of the pictures and the wrong color and, like all the, doing this the whole time. And yeah, it'll be fine.
They won't even notice on the edit out there. So, hey, look, thanks for joining us today. My name's Pete Liston. If you're a part of the military community, and that might mean you're currently serving and you own a business or you're passionate about business, you might be ex-serving. And you might be interested in starting a business one day, or you might have had a business for years, and most importantly, partners and spouses of either. If you're looking for a community or a tribe or a people who have shared your experience and are passionate about business, well, come and check out the veteran business community, because that is exactly what we're here for. So thanks again, Ben and Amy. Have a lovely day. My name's Pete Liston, and out.